Okay, so in today's video, we're going to run through clutch upgrades, and we've got Ronny's Troopy right behind me here, and we're going to fit an NPC 1300 Newton meter clutch. We're going to run through why, what, and how, so you can do it easy and simple yourself. So let's jump into it. Things, why do you possibly need a clutch upgrade or a heavy duty clutch? Well, everyone knows, or you might not know, Landcruiser clutches, they're not the strongest from factory. And then if you want to tune the vehicle, if you're going off-road full driving or you're towing heavy loads, any of those combinations come together, you are going to need a clutch upgrade. It's a known fact the clutches aren't the strongest. However though, if you're going to upgrade the clutch, the last thing you want is to lose drivability. And when I say that is clutch control and a heavy pedal, because when you're driving for long times in the vehicle, having a heavy clutch is just going to driver fatigue, and especially when you're off-road, you know, you're on and off that clutch all the time. So to not have control of the vehicle in every situation, you're going to start to not enjoy the vehicle, and this is why we lead to NPC clutch. It's our choice, what I have in my own vehicle and what I recommend to my customers. So in saying that, that's the clutch we're going to fit today. And why have we gone with this? NPC clutches, the clutch cover, the diaphragm, it's pivot modified. So it's a heavy duty clutch. It gives you more clamping load. How they've done it is a pivot modified the diaphragm, which means you as a driver get a light pedal feel, but the clutch itself is upgraded to take those extra loads. So with that said, let's have a close look at the clutch plate. Okay, so box number one, we've got the clutch cover, clutch plate, all your bearings, and a lining tool in here. In number two, we have got the billet flywheel. So let's jump into this one, show you what's inside the box. So we've got the throw-out bearing here as well, extra packaging. In this package here, we've got the clutch cover. This is what I was talking about, the diaphragm and how that's pivot modified. So obviously it maximises the clamp load of the clutch plate to the flywheel to give the heavy duty effect. However, being pivot modified, you get the best of both worlds. In the cab, on your left foot, it's nice and soft to operate, gives you full control in an off-road condition, and that's why I love the clutch personally myself. And also we've got a lot of older customers that love it, because the stigma that comes with a heavy-duty clutch is you've got to be Arnold Schwarzenegger on your left leg. Well, that doesn't exist anymore with NPC. So we've got a spigot bearing and a lining tool in here as well. It is crucial that you line it up properly. Spigot bearing, flywheel dowels, and clutch cover bolts, high tensile, Allen keys, clutch aligning tool, make sure you use this guy. It's very important. And also clutch plate. Now in box number two, something I love from installing clutches, when you're running a workshop and you're installing things, taking the flywheel off and going machining it, coming back, or unless you've got a machine shop in-house, it limits the job and how long it takes. This guy here, bit of weight in that one, is the new billet flywheel. Now you might ask yourself, why the billet flywheel? It's not a race car, I don't need that. When we talk about a clutch upgrade, what NPC have done is they've found a clutch cover or diaphragm that gives all the pros to having the best clutch upgrade for your Landcruiser, and to do that, they need it modified. The original bolt pattern of the clutch cover from a Toyota's OEM clutch is totally different. This is a different clutch cover, hence the flywheel has a different drill pattern. And you've got the added bonus of having billet material, which is a premium product. Now I might add as well, on the flywheel, it's got a hardened ring gear, so it's a quality flywheel. It's all dowed, it's all balanced and everything. So when you take it off, clean this one down, put it straight on your engine, way to go, there's no downtime. So you are paying a little bit more for a clutch kit, however, you're not having to machine the flywheel when you go to install it. So factor that in when you're looking at clutch upgrades. Factors that affect you needing a clutch upgrade on your Landcruiser, and you say, I'm not going to get a tune or I don't do this. If you're running larger wheels, you're changing the final ratio, the drive ratio. So the load on the clutch plate and the take up is higher. Even if you're just taking your boat and launching it and you're pulling up the boat ramp in high range, you're going to work that clutch. If you are doing that, hot tip, use low range. Now the guys that run 35s and go off-road, your clutch, it is going to get worked a lot harder, and especially when you start putting bigger tyres on there or towing the caravan, you're really going to look for that tune to give you that little bit more of a punch. All those factors all end in the same result, needing a clutch upgrade. And may I say as well, today we're looking at the 1300 Newton meter clutch. There is a bigger clutch, it's a 1600 Newton meter for those guys that need that little bit more again. Okay, so clutch plates, as you can see, it's a full clutch material front and back, and some clutches in the market, what they'll run is a pucked clutch or segmented. They can do a bit of a hybrid, so one side is a full clutch plate, the other side is segmented. The issues I see with that is obviously if they're different friction materials, one side has a higher wear rate, and also if you have less friction material, you have higher clamp loads in said area. Now the problem with that is you get the on or off, like a button clutch. So if it's a 4-puck or whatever that clutch plate is, the less surface area you have, the more load is applied to those areas. So you start losing drivability. However, it does have good traction, but when we're talking about a full drive and going touring, it doesn't really have good manners. So if you're on the beach or soft sand and the clutch is on or off, the issue you're going to have there is when you engage it, there's no take-up point, there's no give point. It's just the power's on or the power's off. And what's going to happen there, you're just going to get bogged. And usually as well on the flywheel, it can turn into hot spots on the flywheel because you've got a lesser area that's distributing that clamping load. Now, in saying that, this guy works really well and it has all the manners and all the clamp load for what you're going to do in your Land Cruiser. If you want to treat it like a race car, maybe a race clutch is for you, but this is what I recommend for anyone that's going off-road and touring and your Land Cruiser, because it has all the manners and the clamp load. Now, with the flywheel and the clutch cover and the clutch plate, when you're handling it, it is a must to make sure it is grease-free, clean hands. You've pulled the gearbox out, make sure you keep everything clean and tidy, and also all the anti-rust inhibitors or any production lubes are taken off the flywheel and the clutch cover prior to assemble. It is a must. It states all that in the instructions, and that you torque the clutch plate down evenly, and you do fit these dowels in the flywheel. But I'll show you all that later on as well. So let's jump into it and run you through some tips of what you need to do on the vehicle. All right, so we're in the workshop, we've got a hoist. You don't have to have a hoist, it's like any job. If you have a hoist, it's going to make it easier. You're going to have visuals under the vehicle, you can see what you're doing, and it's going to be much easier to do. However, if you've got a jack and a mate, it's a pretty easy DIY. These gearboxes aren't the hardest to get out, they're just a little bit big and bulky. So let's chuck this thing in the air, have a look underneath, and I'll show you what you're in for. Okay, car's in the air, quick front to back. I've just put a bit of orange tape on this just so I can point things out, little tips along the way, what you need to do to make your installation nice and easy. Okay, so first thing, car's in the air. Now, aftermarket accessories like exhausts, side steps, water tanks, fuel tanks, all those little things are gonna change the install. Before you start anything, one thing I would highly recommend is if the car's not new and it's been used as a full drive, jump underneath, spray it with inox or CRC. Cross member bolts, they're common as to be seized, which is these 4 here. 2 are in the chassis, 2 go all the way through. If it's a really old one and it has been a commercial used vehicle, sometimes those guys are going to snap off on you, and you do need to put a nut on the top of these 2 here. You can get away with that. These ones here, you're going to be drilling and tapping to repair. Now, exhaust, if you do need to take it off, as well, if it's a DPF, non-DPF, that's going to change. DPF vehicle, a little bit more mucking around. Spray these nuts and bolts with some inox CRC, and obviously, like I mentioned, side steps, have a look at them before you put the car on the air and make sure that you can get the side step away without having to get halfway through taking things off and realising, hang on, I'll lower the car and reposition it. So now you've got that said, you can start obviously undoing things like at the front here. One thing I would recommend actually that you should check before you put the car in the air is these guys. Pretty common. They're ABS or wheel speed sensors. If they haven't had a drop kit put on them and a linkage, they can snap on you, especially if you've got sway bar spacers and stuff like that, or you've got extra suspension on the vehicle. Check them. Sway bar, you can drop it down. So from the front, you can take the front tail shaft out. One thing it's great to check with full droop is the tail shaft isn't contacting the sway bar. If this is incorrect geometry, this guy here at full droop will contact the sway bar and you will end up with a damaged drive shaft. So that's a bit of a tip there as well. All your tail shafts, check all your unis when they're out of the vehicle. That's the front one, rear one. Obviously pretty self-explanatory. Remove front to back. Now, transfer case. When you've lowered and undone these bolts, check everything's not seized like I mentioned earlier. The low range shifter, there is a little tapered fitting bolt under the nut at the top, which you might be able to see. Actually, we'll lower the gearbox and you'll see that when we get to it, and we'll show you that. Now, when you do that, a tip for it to make it easy is undo the 14mm up here, the low range shifter, 3 bolts on the side, that'll come off. So undo that, it'll make the low range nice and easy. And then also when you get the gearbox tilted back, the gear shifter in this vehicle, you can put your hands in there, push down the spring detent, turn it, and it'll drop the shifter out, push it up in the car, and I'll give you a tip how to put that back in. A mate does come in handy when you do that. Now, back up the front. Gearbox, bell housing bolts. When you take them out, there is 2 bolts just here. One of these guys is exposed, one isn't. Sometimes you will take them out and they'll bind up and you'll pull a thread with them. There's not much you can do with that because the front of the hole is exposed. It does get dirt and grime and you may need to do a thread repair. If it comes out not so great, I'd highly recommend that you clean the thread, get a new bolt from Toyota, and away you go. Once again, like I mentioned, with the crossmember bolts, just put new bolts in them. It's much easier, they're not expensive. Now, bell housing bolts, clutch slave cylinder, 212mm, that's got to come off. Your earth, you'll see how diff breather kit there as well. That's already connected up, so that's got to come off. Disconnect your wiring harnesses. You also have got up here, a little zip tie holding the harness away from the tail shaft. The idea of this is it secures the harness here, it doesn't drop into any nasties, moving componentry. Okay, so the gearbox is out of the car. I want to make a mention, if the gearbox and you're doing the clutch, it's all out of your way, it's a really great time to upgrade the crossover pipe. That joins the driver's side to the bank on the passenger side. Obviously it's a single turbo, it's a ceramic coated upgraded crossover pipe. So if you're getting to that, it's really easy. The bolts, you have heaps of access as well. So if they are seized and you have to work with them, it's a really mint time to get that done. Another one I want to just say to you as well, rear main seal, which is the engine oil seal around the crankshaft behind the flywheel. If that's leaking when you've got the flywheel off, don't leave it, replace it. I use a genuine seal, that's all we use. It's not a seal I'd leave and take the chance. If it fails, it's going to destroy any clutch that you fit to the vehicle contaminating oil. Another one, coolant crossover pipes at the top of the engine in the valley. It's really easy to get to. Inspect that at the same time. That's something we see sometimes needs a bit of attention. Now, if it does have a DPF, there is a lot more going on the passenger side. This doesn't have a DPF, so you've just got one support bracket. And if the vehicle is fitted with gauges upgrade, just be careful with EGT sensors and probes. Once again, bit of care there. And really, the gearbox, once you've got it loosened off and you've got a gearbox stand under it, just a little shuffle and it should just slide out easily. If it's too hard, something's still connected or jammed up, don't go prying and leaving it. They do generally come out nice and easy. If you're looking for a quick tip when you're fitting diff breather kit to your 70 series, bell housing is the breather point for your transfer case and your gearbox. Simply pinch this off here, put the breather on there and plumb it in, away you go. Don't take all the interior, all the seats and floor up to remove the cover plate. Simply lower the gearbox down a little bit, push your 2 fingers down on it, spring loaded on the little gear shift locator plate, turn it about 90 degrees, it's spring loaded, it'll pop up, the shifter will come out of the way, slide the box out, makes the job really nice and easy, so don't get caught into that trap of pulling the inside of your vehicle apart. Okay, so clutch fork, release bearing, 70 series, simply just give it a quick pull like that, it'll come off. You want to put some grease between the contact points just down here, a small amount of grease. The one that gives you a lot of pivot point squeaks or clutch squeaks is this guy here on the pivot ball in here. So you want to make sure you put some grease on there. Clean out all the old dry grease and dust as well. And obviously as you put it on, you just want to check that it goes on, give it a nice thump like that, or just click on so it's located, and then just check this moves freely. No grease on the splines, just a small amount on the support shaft there, on the input shaft, and make sure your clutch slides on easy on the splines. Transfer cases and oil leaks. Sometimes you are going to see a bit of a weep from the front seal of the transfer case. It's something I would say it's pretty urgent to attend to. Obviously the way the oil circulation system in the transfer case does get fed down to the front bearing, so if this seal does fail, it literally will empty the transfer case. So if you see a leak from there, attend to it sooner than later. Obviously it doesn't hold much oil, so on a long trip the transfer case is going to run dry and you will need to replace it. Okay, so another quick little tip, gearboxes and wiring harnesses, what to connect and when and where. You'll see these two connectors here, they do look the same, they're 2-pin connectors, however they're different connectors on the vehicle. When I say that is, if you connect them around the wrong way, the vehicle will stay in first gear, or the ECU will pick up in first gear, which will be a torque reduction map in the factory ECU. So you won't have as much power and torque output as you would normally if they're connected the right way around. So make sure, in all, don't connect them the wrong way around. Make sure you plug them the right way. Aligning the clutch and getting it to go in nicely. I've got the gearbox in gear, so I can turn it from the output shaft. It's going to turn the input shaft. Obviously the pressure plate and clutch assembly is going to stay stationary because it's bolted to the engine. So now we can align the splines as we push it in, and it'll just mesh nicely, and then it'll slide in because we've got the clutch plate aligned with the spigot bearing. So now we'll just push forward with the gearbox. You'll see here there is a black bolt, that's a bell housing bolt. The silver one just here is a starter motor bolt. There's two of them. You don't want to loosen two starter motors. The starter's in the valley, just the black bolts is the only two you want to loosen to get the gearbox out. So make sure you don't take out the wrong bolts. Okay, another little tip, gearbox, wiring harnesses and support. This is a factory zip tie. If it is not on the gearbox, you need to fit another zip tie. You'll see this wiring harness just here. It does need to be secured around this bracket. Obviously you've got a moving drive shaft here. Don't want the harness to drop down and have contact with the moving drive shaft. So we'll fit that back up there. And the other one is commonly seen is the earth strap. Sometimes gets tucked away when you take the gearbox off and it gets left off. It needs to be bolted back on. It's just above the clutch slave cylinder, so make sure that's back on the gearbox as well. Okay, so with the diff breather as well, we've located the hose, put the fitting on it. We just want to make sure that we secure the diff breather hose to the earth strap under here, and it keeps it away from the drive shaft in the front of the vehicle. Okay, so lubricating the clutch slave cylinder push rod. You'll see this little rod here. We just want a minute little bit of grease on the end of it, nothing major. We don't want to risk the chances of grease coming off of it and contaminating the clutch plate or clutch mechanism. As you can see, just literally rolls through. And then put the two bolts up. We have got an inspection hatch here with a plastic cover. Make sure this goes back on. It helps prevent debris off-road going in there, but obviously it's a good little inspection port as well. Okay, so the low range shifter mechanism, we've got 3 bolts on the side of the gearbox, but obviously we've taken it off the little dowel cotter pin here as well. So we've undone the nut, the washer, we've knocked it through. It's enabled us to slip it straight off the shifter here. To put it back on, the tip is to leave the front 3 bolts off, drop it down so you can actually move it around so you can align it up nicely. So we've got the rear shifter on. Now we're just going to locate the front of the shifter mechanism, bolt it onto the bell house or the gearbox, and away we go. The low range shifter is all fitted back up. Probably won't. Okay, so greasing the nipples on the drive shafts. You only want to put enough in it. As soon as you see the jack shaft move, that's enough, or just 3 pumps. Too much grease isn't great as well. Obviously you're going to hydraulic the shaft as the vehicle goes up and down. Rear suspension is going to move, or front suspension as well on the front shaft. It's going to cause a hydraulic scenario, and obviously that's what I'm talking about, getting the tail shafts out makes it hard. Same thing with universal joints, just a little bit of grease. As soon as you see it extrude from the seals, that's enough. Obviously universals on the 70s are all serviceable, so make sure you grease them up. Okay, so now the clutch is in the vehicle, clean hands, jump in the car, going to pop the bonnet, and we're going to evacuate all the clutch fluid out of the reservoir and put new fluid in there, get the level right. We're going to bleed the clutch. You may need someone to give you a hand to do it, so let's pop the bonnet and get into it. Okay, so clutch fluid, Toyota fluid, that's what we use here. It's .3, so don't mix it with .4. Going to rip off the reservoir lid, evacuate it, top it up, clean fluid, bleed it out, and then we're going to check the adjustment of the clutch pedal and see if it needs a little bit of tweaking, because we have put an upgraded clutch with a pivot modified diaphragm in it. Okay, so clutch is in the vehicle, bleeding the clutch. We've got an inspection hatch here to check for adjustment. If you're going to bleed the clutch, evacuate the whole master cylinder and fill it with clean brake fluid. Flush it all through so it's nice and clean. You may need someone to assist in bleeding procedures. Once you've got the clutch pedal adjustment, it is great to come down the bottom here and check that the clutch fork isn't preloaded. If it is, you're going to have premature wear on the throwout bearing, and also the clutch function isn't going to be correct. So make sure the clutch adjustment is done correctly. Okay, so clutch is all bled, we're happy with that. I've had a mate give you a hand to do that. Now clutch pedal adjustment, you want to make sure that the clutch is fully depressing, disengaging, so you can change gears. So you want to check the vehicle moves and the clutch isn't nipping up and hard to get first, second or reverse gear. When you have got the adjustment right, one thing you need to make sure that the clutch pedal isn't pumping up and you've got a bit of free play on the top of the pedal. So if the pedal's rock solid and it's pushing up, that's no good. You want to make sure you've got free play where nothing happens and all you've got is the spring of the clutch pedal, like the lever mechanism itself, before any hydraulics come into play. So same thing with the brake pedals. It is ideal to have them nice and level. If you've got the clutch pedal right high or right low, you've probably got something going on with your adjustment or an aftermarket slave cylinder. So just make sure the adjustment is done right. And last of all, have a road test, check the drivability, and you do need to do 1,000 Ks on the car, bed the clutch in. It's not a chuck it in, let's go off-roading and drop the clutch. Bed the clutch in and make sure it's nice and its adjustment is on point, and you'll have a clutch for many years to come. Okay, so when it comes time to install the clutch, we've opened the box, we've checked all the contents, you've unwrapped it. Now, if you're coming to fit the clutch to the vehicle, you're obviously going to have dirty hands, greasy hands, gearboxes out. Do not touch the clutch plate, clutch cover, flywheel. It needs to have clean hands. Don't take the risk of contaminating the new clutch assembly. If you get grease on the clutch plate in here, it is going to contaminate it, burn in it, and the clutch isn't going to be as good as it could be if it was clean and tidy. Now, that grease is going to stay in there. Once it's embedded in there, that's the clutch done. So make sure you have clean hands. Once again, read all the instructions, fitting instructions. Don't just say, I'll fit 1,000 clutches, I know what to do. It's a performance clutch. It comes with performance clutch instructions, what to do. Once again, it's got a bit of hints and tips for the VDJ here as well. It's got all your torque settings for your flywheel, making sure the faces are clean where it goes onto the flywheel onto the back of the crank. Once again, the flywheel's cleaned down and you've put all the dowels in, you've torqued it all up. Use a torque wrench, do it once, do it properly, and make sure your clutch is going to last how it should. Okay guys, just to wrap this video up, just want to say big thanks to NPC and all the support they've given us here with what I believe is in the best clutch in the world for a Land Cruiser. So if you're after one, get in touch with us today. Now, if that means if you're nationally anywhere in Australia, we can help you out. Get in touch with us. And also for heaps of our other clients that are international, once again, send us an email, get in touch with us. We can get clutches and parts anywhere in the world. We want to make sure you get the right gear for your Land Cruiser to go off-road. If you think this video helped you out, subscribe below, get in touch with us if you're after any other Land Cruiser parts. Otherwise, I'll see you out on the tracks. Enjoy full driving, guys.